guys, so about a week and a half ago, I hit 3,000 subscribers. I told you guys I wanted to do a Q&A, and so I've actually already done kind of 2 of them. I did a live one, then I did one about some personal questions and YouTube questions. And now, since I talk about movies and TV on this channel, I thought I would take 37 of your best questions and try and answer them as best I can, as fast as I can. So I'm going to try and tackle 37 questions in under an hour with my little helper. Who are you again? What's your name? Chloe. Chloe is going to try and help me out with some of these. Without further delay, since we've got a lot of questions to get to, we're going to go ahead and get started. Question number 1 is actually kind of 3 different people's questions, kind of combined together. Devon, Pilgrim, Zachary, Miklas, and Saidlantis XD all asked kind of the same question. What are your 10 favorite movies and TV shows? So I don't necessarily have a list kind of defined anywhere out there. As for movies, I put out a video over a year ago, one of my first videos on the channel called, I think, like 15 movies that will always be with me. It's not really a 10 favorite movies or 10 best movies, but it's 10 movies that meant a lot to me. So hopefully I'll remember to put the link up there so you can check out that video and see that one. But I mean, it's, you know, Star Wars, Star Trek 2, Indiana Jones, Terminator 2, Aliens. It's a lot of the stuff I talk about a lot on the channel. Most Die Hard, Lethal Weapon 1 and 2, stuff like that. Those are some of my favorite movies. Jurassic Park, a lot of Steven Spielberg, a lot of James Cameron, a lot of action. That sort of stuff is the stuff that's on that list, and you can check that out in that video. And then as for 10 favorite TV shows, once again, I don't have a list, but if I were to just kind of go through some of them, Star Trek Next Generation, that's always tough because like so many shows have like 4 great seasons and then they just lost it. Or like the show Lost, the first 1-2 seasons are fantastic, and then it just goes off the deep end. So it's always tricky for me. Like The Office seasons 1 through 4, I really like Parks and Rec. Breaking Bad as a series as a whole is one that was an incredible watch through, but it's not one that I rewatch a whole lot. The Shield, an incredible TV show that I've watched one time, I haven't rewatched through a bunch of times. Batman the Animated Series, that's probably well, I'll get to that in just a little bit. Batman the Animated Series. What's the other shows what are some shows we like?
I like
anything? You like Guardians of the Galaxy?
No.
Oh, no. We tried. So I don't have a list, but it's all over the place, and it's tricky because so many TV shows have great seasons and bad seasons. As of recent seasons, Daredevil season 1 and 2, great, phenomenal. But like I loved Arrow at first, and then it's kind of gone bonkers, and it's tricky. I have no idea how to say this name, but Kshitiz, Mangal, Bajracharya, I have no idea. I have no idea how to say any of those names. Asked several questions. Are you a critic on Rotten Tomatoes? No, it's actually really tricky to get on Rotten Tomatoes, so I doubt I'll ever be on Rotten Tomatoes. The second one, do you watch professional wrestling? I do not. I'm not opposed to it. I find it kind of enjoyable. I'm actually trying to kind of make it a thing I watch with my kids because I'm interested in it. A lot of you guys ask about it. It's just not something I watch, but I would totally watch it if it was a family thing. Next question. Would you like a Wolverine versus Terminator movie? No. Things like that, kind of these crossovers of different franchises that aren't connected, that's sort of like fan fiction territory for me. And so that, like as a skit on YouTube, I'm into that stuff. Like Bat in the Sun, I think, is a production company. They put out a lot of these kind of 5-10 minute short videos of 2 of these people battling each other. I watch a lot of those. Those are a ton of fun. But as a movie, it just the things that would make me like a Wolverine movie and the things that would make me like a Terminator movie would not make them intertwine into something that I'd like be particularly interested in. If you're going to do a Wolverine movie, I want a proper Wolverine movie. If you're going to do a Terminator movie, do a proper Terminator movie and leave kind of the sort of like fan fiction-y stuff to the internet. And his last question, I do not read comic books because none are available at the place I live. but I like movies based on comics. Do you think I can enjoy more if I know something about the comics? Absolutely. I think if you know the comic books, it gives it's kind of like anything in life. The greater your depth of knowledge, the more things you notice in the world around you. And the more things you can kind of appreciate the little elements that are put into it, whether that's knowing about just history of your own culture, other cultures, you just see the little nuggets of truth all around you, whether that's a book adaptation brought to film, when you know all these characters' names and the full backstory, it brings so much more to the table than when you just have the movie. And then with comic book movies, they've done we're in a great era of comic book movies, so they do an amazing job of taking 50, 60, 70, 30, 20 years of comic book history and putting them into these movies that stand alone, but they'll put little characters in there. They'll make little references in there. They'll have someone walk in and say something, and all of that is referencing this bigger depth of knowledge of kind of what's going around it. It also depends on which comic book movies as to the amount of added depth you get to it. Like the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, they're very much kind of his own Elseworlds standalone pocket Nolan Batman universe. And so there's little nuggets in there where Joseph Gordon-Levitt, someone goes, "Hey, your name's Robin." And like reading the comic books doesn't make that line make more sense. It makes that line make way less sense. So a lot of his, because it's so kind of Elseworldy, the comic books don't add too much. So like one of the big inspirations the two big inspirations for The Dark Knight Rises were No Man's Land and Nightfall. In knowing either one of those stories in depth, they're nothing like that movie. You can see Bane is Nightfall and him breaking Batman's back, but the story's totally different as to what they do with it. Backstory of Bane is totally different. And then likewise with No Man's Land, totally different reasons for why that's a storyline about Gotham kind of being chained off from the world and becoming a no man's land where the people that are stuck there and no one can go in. But totally different reasons. And so reading those comic books don't really give you greater depth to them. That's why I read No Man's Land to see if I'd get greater depth. It was like, oh no, this is just a different kind of version of a plot device, not as opposed to an actual story. So it kind of depends, but a lot of the Avengers stuff, Spider-Man ones, I think there's a little bit, X-Men, really all the stuff besides DC, I think there's a little bit more depth you can pull out of if you read the comic books that have inspired those types of stories and the little Easter eggs plugged in here and there throughout things. Next up, we got Ryan O'Toole, who's one of my patrons, and so they get preferential treatment when they ask a question. I answer it. If you want to support me over on Patreon, it's the #1 way you can support my channel, help me continue doing what I'm doing. Ryan's one of those people over there, and he asked, I have yet to watch the Lord of the Rings movies. Should I change this immediately, or is it something I continue to wait on? Just by chance, I happen to have my copy of the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit books right here. So, hey, Chloe, do you want to read these books? Yeah, you do. That's pretty cool. Your mom will be excited about that, I think. So for me, I'm not actually a Middle-earth, Tolkien, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings fan. It's just not my thing. And it's kind of like with Harry Potter, which I've also got right here. It's not my thing. I appreciate it. I'm not like, you're insane if you like that. It's just not one that's connected with me the way that Star Wars, Batman, Superman, Star Trek, the way those have. And so for me, on a personal level, as to my level of enjoyment, if you haven't checked out the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies up to this point in time, it's unlikely you'd watch them and just be like, wow, what have I been missing all this time? You'll probably watch them and be like, okay, I kind of get it. But because Ryan O'Toole, the person asking this question, you are a movie reviewer, you are on YouTube doing what we do, yeah, you need to watch it as soon as possible. And find one of your buddies on YouTube that's a huge Tolkien fan and do collab videos, do something like that with it. But just as a movie fan, they're significant movies. They're part of movie history as kind of popular films that people care about, that people like. They're tied to classic literature of Western culture of the last 100 years. They're historically significant, so you have to check them out. Also because for a lot of people, they're a different group of people's prequels. The Hobbit are Tolkien fans' prequels for a lot of them because they have their own version of gigantic problems the way that the Star Wars prequels have problems. So absolutely, I don't know if you'll get to watch it this year, but I would schedule that for your channel for 2018 as definite stuff that you need to do for your channel. Next up, Nightfall asks, have you ever played a Batman Arkham game? Yeah, I've played Batman Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and Origins. So I haven't played the one with the Batmobile where you drive around with guns or something like that. I haven't. Arkham Knight, I think. I haven't played Arkham Knight. The other three I have played. I've played through them, and I think Arkham City, they're all phenomenal games. Arkham City is my favorite of that batch. But yeah, I mean, they're great games. They're amazing games, and hopefully they'll take a little pause and then continue with a new version of that type of world play in a few years. But yeah, I love those games. Very cool. And great design for Batman's costume. That's the costume that I want to see in a Batman movie. I like what they did with Ben Affleck's one because I don't really like the rubber suits of the Burton Schumacher era. Certainly not the Schumacher era. And then Christopher Nolan went with this like so grounded. It was like RoboCop. It looked, and I don't like that at all. And I get what he's doing with it, but I don't like it. And so then I saw Arkham Knight or Arkham City, and I was like, I want to see a movie that does this. And then that's not exactly what the Snyderverse ones did, Batfleck, but pretty soon. But then I really like what Batfleck did too. So yeah, the costume in it is very, very cool. Do you like Batman? You like Batman video games? All right, SirTyJensen asks, do you like Jim Carrey? Yeah, I mean, I think everyone my age really enjoyed at least 2 or 3 of his movies from the 90s. Yeah, I mean, he's got 4 or 5 really great comedies and about a 10-year stretch there. And then the last 10 years, not as great. He hasn't done as well of transitioning into dramatic work as you would have hoped he would have, because he could do it. He's a very good dramatic actor. We've seen that in many things going back 20 years, showing that this guy can actually act. And for whatever reason, it just hasn't seemed like that's kind of clicked for him the way that like Bill Murray in the past transitioned a little bit smoother into a little bit more adult work, like dramatic work. Next question, he also asks, have you seen Man on the Moon? Yeah, I saw it in the theater. I haven't seen it since it was in the theater, so it's almost been 20 years since I watched it. But I have seen it. I did see it in the theater, and to the point of his dramatic work there. Like, that's brilliant dramatic work that he did almost 20 years ago, and for some reason Hollywood hasn't done enough with that. All right, next up, Mr. Hollywood Reviews. What are your least favorite movies of 2017 so far, as the end of the year is getting very close? All right, let me switch over to my little video deal over here. So looking at some of the top rated ones, my top rated films of the year, and I'll intentionally kind of mess around with the order on this one. Patriots Day, Logan, Hacksaw Ridge, actually a movie from last year, but I saw it this year. Wheelman, Brawl in Cell Block 99, Dunkirk, The Glass Castle, War for the Planet of the Apes, Wonder Woman. Chloe, what's your favorite movie of the year? That we saw in the theater? My Little Pony, that's the last movie she saw in the theater. So those are the ones at the top, and the ones at the bottom. I've got Resident Evil, The Final Chapter, The Circle, The Comedian, Kill 'Em All, Rough Night, Underworld, Blood Wars, Transformers 5. So those are the ones that I've seen this year and either really liked or really did not like. Aman Amajad, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, says top 5 Marvel superheroes. We'll go with Captain America, Wolverine. So you got the nice guy, and then you got the bad boy. Tony Stark, so you got the smart, well, she's listening, so we won't say that phrase. Smart guy that is a smart aleck. I guess you got to go with some Spider-Man for that youthful energy, and then throw Punisher in there. He's not really a hero, but we'll give it to him anyway. Winstott says Star Wars versus Star Trek. For me, I get in one sense why there's been this 40-year battle of Star Trek versus Star Wars, which one is better, because they both involve space and spaceships. But beyond that, they're different genres. They're not the same thing. Star Wars is like space fantasy. It's sci fantasy. It's not science fiction. It's intentionally at the core of it, people with magic powers that can move things with their brains and make people do things with their brains. It's making no effort to be anywhere grounded in reality. It's intentionally uses the language of fairy tales a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, is intentionally designed to sound fairy tale like. It's a very much modern mythology. If you look at the writings of Joseph Campbell and his works that heavily influenced George Lucas as he kind of became involved in that stuff, he's writing modern mythology, a very classic mythology using space, but it's very space fantasy in nature. Star Trek is at its core science fiction, which is to say it's designing an idea of what the future could be like, an idealized version of what the future could look like if we progress past specific types of pettiness amongst mankind and continue the sense of adventure to go out and explore strange new places and discover strange new creatures, new worlds, all that fun stuff. So they're not really the same thing. Star Trek is also meant to be allegorical storytelling to tackle relevant cultural modern issues. Star Wars is not doing that. So Star Trek is inherently on an adventure, but it's kind of cerebral in the idea that it's tackling ideas, issues, frustrations, struggles of the time in storytelling formats out in space sort of ideas, whereas Star Wars is not intended to be grounded at all, and it deals in mythology. So I don't like even having to pick them, because it's like someone, hey, do you like Jaws more, or do you like My Little Pony more? Well, I like Jaws more, but why are we comparing these two things that aren't similar at all? Like, that's the sort of thing to me that makes it very odd. Now, I like both of these things, and for what they're trying to do, I like both of them a great deal. I will say, in the realm of TV, Star Trek wins. In the realm of movies, Star Wars wins. How about we go with that? At least the highs of Star Wars movies, I think there's more highs with Star Wars movies than there are with Star Trek movies. But even that, I don't know how far I'd go with that. I don't really like comparing them because they're just not the same thing. Jordan Nykotra asks, once again, another name I'm sure I mispronounced, what are some of your favorite movie soundtracks? So some of the obvious ones, you go with Guardians of the Galaxy. Going back to growing up, Top Gun. We had Top Gun on vinyl, and so I listened to that one all the time, and I was a stupid kid, and so I thought that Tom Cruise was the one that was singing all the songs because he was the star of the movie. In case you're wondering, that's not how it works. Rocky IV, that was one I checked out from the library a lot going up, and Hearts on Fire, all that fun stuff. Ride of the Tiger's also on that one, as well as Rocky III. So I listened to that one a lot growing up. Batman Forever actually has a really good soundtrack. It has like A Kiss from a Rose, got a U2 song on there, so I remember listening to that one a lot back in the day. What are some movies with great soundtracks? Like Lego Batman 4? And the Lego Movie, Lego Ninjago. You notice a pattern in that one with her. So there you go. Those are some that kind of come to mind pretty quickly. Nerd Awesomeness asks, after the recent fiasco of Star Trek Discovery, what do you think Star Trek IV in the rebooted movie series will be like? I got a couple different thoughts on this one. First one, Star Trek Discovery's kind of a fiasco for a group of people, but then apparently it's a big enough hit for other group of people that they've renewed the show. So it's not just a universal flop fiasco. It's very much in this weird category of, I don't think people really know how to evaluate its broad scale reception from people, because it's a fan base that's going to be very vocal and loud, but they're getting tons of subscriptions, but you're getting subscriptions from people that don't like it. And you go on the internet and you see people raving about it. You can look on Twitter, find tons of fans of it. You can go on Twitter and find some people hate it. You can go on YouTube and find people that love it. You can find people that hate it. You go in the comment sections and it's a back and forth. You check out any of my videos talking about Star Trek Discovery, all of them have tons of likes and tons of dislikes. And depending on the tone I take in a given episode, I can shift the number of dislikes way up, or I can shift it way down. And there's just like so many people out there that even though it's the same me with the same opinions about the show, tons of likes, tons of dislikes all over the place. So you can't really call it just a fiasco. You can say it's not universally loved. There's not one clear feeling from people. Now, what do I think that ties into Star Trek 4? I don't know that there's any ties to Star Trek 4 unless one of the big plot twists of this season. If one of the big plot twists of this season is it's actually in the Kelvin universe. So the Captain Pike is Bruce Greenwood. The Kirk in this universe is Chris Pine. Now, of course, you run into problems with that because our Sarek's already a different actor. But if they were to do that, I mean, all bets are off. But there's no reason to think they're doing that because they've said it's the Prime universe. So that's just weird speculation. But independent from all that stuff, they're two separate universes. How do I think that the fiasco of Star Trek Discovery will affect Star Trek 4? I don't think it'll affect it at all. I think they're viewed as two totally separate things, kind of run by two separate companies. They're both Star Trek properties, but the studios that kind of manage the film versus television, it's not really the same thing. It's not the same group of people and creatives the way it is kind of with Lucasfilm. There's this certain umbrella of people all under the same kind of banner getting vision, tying things together. It's not like that with Star Trek. So I don't think there's any ties to it, and I don't think they have any clue what they're going to do with Star Trek 4 because Star Trek Beyond didn't do very well. I mean, as much money as it made, I would love to have that much money sent my way, but given how much they invested into it with a brand name like Star Trek, with the pretty close to universal praise for the film, it's like an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's really good on Rotten Tomatoes. And then the movie just didn't perform well. So they made a movie that the people that saw it liked it. They made a movie that critics liked it. But there was a cap on the number of people that were interested in seeing it. So I don't think they know what they want to do with that independent of Star Trek Discovery. And then given the bizarre response to Star Trek Discovery, which is so divisive and contentious, like it's people angry at each other. The nastiest stuff I've received on my channel is on my Star Trek Discovery videos. And it's like a daily thing for people to just go off on me for different reasons. I just don't think that they know, and that's why we haven't heard an announcement since before Star Trek Beyond came out, when they were like,
Garage Movie Reviews. My name is Levi, the Garage Movie Guy, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite
what just happened?
Ernest Scared Stupid. Now, I talked about Ernest previously in my Ernest Goes to Camp.
No.
Whoa, was that crazy? The computer came to life. Yeah, that was scary. So that's kind of my take on it. I don't think there's any connection between the two of them, and the response to Star Trek Discovery just affirms kind of the confusion in all of that we haven't heard anything about Star Trek 4 in over a year. And they were like, yeah, Chris Hemsworth's going to come back as Kirk's dad, which in and of itself was like, okay. I mean, you got a big actor. I get that, but huh? What's going on? Chandler's video asks, do you have any thoughts on the Disaster Artist movie coming out? Yeah, I'm very excited for it. If you don't know what that is, it's a movie from the Franco brothers about the movie The Room. Arguably one of the worst movies ever made, and I mean, just like it's an experience to watch it because of how hilariously bad it is, and ill-conceived, and for incompetent on every level. Every decision made is a bad one. So the Franco brothers are making a movie about it. All of the buzz surrounding it is great. I know a buddy of mine, one of my best friends, he's already seen it, says it's great. It's hilarious. It's heartfelt. It's not making fun of The Room. It's like a celebration of everything's kind of surrounding all of it. So I'm very excited for it. There you go. Patrick J asks, how would you feel if Luke actually does turn dark in The Last Jedi? Would that betray the character? I don't know. It's just tough to say without having seen the movie and knowing what they're doing with it and where they can go with things and how they can resolve things. On the surface, the idea of turning Luke dark is very off-putting to me. Does feel like a betrayal of the character. It feels like a betrayal of the original trilogy. But there's a lot of things you can do with that and where they're going with it. If the actual way it plays out is that he's the bad guy, turns out to be the main villain, and he's evil and has to be stopped by Rey, and maybe Kylo Ren team up to stop Luke. And the big victory at the end of Episode 9 is Luke finally being defeated. I mean, that could be a thing that's a deal breaker. Like I'm done with Star Wars for a while if they did something like that. But there's a lot of things between. Luke is actually legitimately full-blown the bad guy that has to be stopped because the dark side's just taken over him, and he's this hero savior guy of the universe. There's a lot of stuff in between there where you can toy with the fact that he seemed to be going pretty dark in Return of the Jedi. He was in doing some stuff. He didn't have complete full training. He's doing Jedi stuff on his own. So there's some things in there that I think are worthy explorations of him toying with the dark. That's not something that really does feel going too evil and negative with a character that was the hero of my lifetime. Like he was the hero, and if when I'm 36 years old you decide he's evil, that feels a bit like a betrayal of the character and a little bit of all of us lifelong fans. Zack Pope's got a couple questions for me. Just as a quick question to you, Zack Pope, as you're watching this in the future for the comments. Have I ever accidentally called you Cody Pope? There's a guy I know in real life that's a really good friend of mine, mentor guy, and then his name's Cody Pope. And then obviously on YouTube, there's a couple different Codys, and then you're a Zack Pope. And so I've wondered if I've ever said to one of the batch of you 3 people that are either Codys or a Pope, have I ever called any of you Cody Pope? Have I ever done that to you? That's my question for you. Tell me in the comment section. Now your questions. If you could make any film, what genre would you do? The direction I've tended to go with that as I've thought about it, and I've started working on screenplays many times. I have all sorts of outlines for stuff. Probably be an action thriller, potentially time travel action thriller. Those are the sorts of things, like just kind of a lot of those straightforward action movies, the stuff from my childhood and teenage years that was just huge with the classic action stars. That's stuff that I would kind of default to thinking would be the sort of thing like, yeah, to make something like that and bring it up my love for martial arts, love for some sci-fi stuff, and not try and like come up with the most clever, brilliant script because I'm not smart enough to do that, but take a simple idea, puts a couple great ideas in there with a great action style to it, incorporating just the right sort of things that I've loved, and a straightforward plot that you can kind of back behind your hero. That's the sort of thing I would default to thinking would be the sort of movie that I would make, assuming that, and I was also based that on the idea of, would you want to do a big comic book movie? No. Would you want to do a Star Wars movie? Maybe like a spin-off one that would be like a Western off on, some distant planet with a Jedi between. I've criticized Star Wars heavily for spending so much time right around the Clone Wars to A New Hope, but like I could see myself doing a story about a Jedi that's disenfranchised after Order 66 is off on some distant planet, and it's essentially Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name, the good, the bad, and the ugly for a few dollars more, a fistful of dollars. That stuff that's based off Akira Kurosawa, which was inspiration for the original Star Wars, A New Hope, that influenced George Lucas heavily. Now take that with a lone Jedi with the powers of the Force, disenfranchised. He's not a bad guy, but he's not looking to do good, off on some planet, on some adventure, helping a small town or something like that. I could see myself doing like something like that too. But just those sort of like central action hero, whether a Jedi, whether time traveling cop, maybe Time Cop reboot for me. That's something that I would line up with, and I'd want to have a very distinctive action style to it, bringing certain things that would be very important to me to have a distinct action style. Then he also asked, which are you, Jedi or Sith? I'm going to go with Jedi. I just always lean good guys or anti-hero, but I don't tend to be the one that wants to be the bad guy. Jeff Ito's movie blog. What are your most anticipated films of 2018? They're not comic book or Star Wars movies. Ready Player One. What other movies are we looking forward to for next year? Jurassic World, the sequel on that one. It's a Taco Bell movie for me. It's easy to consume, just wild mayhem type stuff that I enjoy. So that one comes to mind. What movies are we looking forward to for next year?
Black Panther.
The Pink Panther?
Or the Black Panther.
Oh, Black Panther. Wow, that is an interesting one you came up with. But he said no comic books. Great pick. You gonna go see Black Panther in the theater with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna go see Black Panther. Yeah, probably not. She's only 3. So, I've actually tried to look these. I read this question a week ago and watched some other videos to see what other people recommended. I actually forgot. I just can't remember the other movies coming out, so I don't have a good answer for you. Austin Willcutt asks, how much life do you think movie theaters have left nowadays? Do you see a long future for movie theater chains, or is it like a dinosaur dying off to the digital age? I think movie theaters have a while to go, for the simple fact of the matter that there's something about the theater experience of just sitting in a dark room with a room full of people watching the movie. She enjoys that. Do you like going to the movies? She likes going to the movies. She gets shy. As soon as I ask her a question, did you like going to go see My Little Pony? Did you like to go see the Lego movie? Yeah, you like going to the movies. There's something about that experience that's a cultural thing that I don't think is going to disappear anytime soon. But you can see that the nature of the film-going experience is shifting drastically as television's getting better and home theaters are leaps and bounds ahead of where they were in the year 2000, where you had a TV that was incredibly thick, heavy, wasn't HD, like the picture quality was so incredibly limited. At the best possible quality you could have at home, it was still very limited to what you could do. The screens weren't very big, and you contrast that with now, where you can get an affordable 60-inch HD 4K TV that's, I mean, just insane how vivid the colors are. Like most home theaters these days have more vivid colors than most theaters I go to. And obviously the screen's not as big, but like just the vividness of the picture quality itself is usually better at a home because they're not projecting from so far away. And so because of that, you're just seeing a pretty big shift towards, that's why you have so many big blockbusters, franchise type movies, escalating budgets, and mid-budget movies kind of disappearing to home video and television because the theater experience is changing, but I don't think it's going to disappear anytime soon. He also asked, what do you think could solve the division with the Star Trek Discovery series? I don't think there's any way to solve the division. There's some things they can do to lessen it. They can take what they're doing right now and shave off some of the rough edges and move away from a war setting to a Discovery setting on the show Discovery, and you'd win a lot of people back. You could get the crew not so just constantly at tension and odds with each other and come up with storylines that aren't at their core of it, causing the ensemble of people to hate each other. You can move away from things like that, and that I think would help a good bit. But I think at the core of it, you've got a group of people that define Star Trek as this, and they're frustrated if they don't get that. And then over here, you've got a group of people that are excited. Look, we're doing something new and crazy with Star Trek. Finally, it's not that old, stale, too purified of a future, too much of a utopia that it was dull and boring and stale. And so I'm so glad we're doing something different, and they're changing things up. And so I think you just have two categories of people that are so different that it makes it tricky. From my perspective, there's a lot of room between these two perspectives. There's a lot of room, in which case you keep the idealistic view of hope for the future, you keep the sense of adventure and discovery, and then you use modern filming, storytelling, serialized, more complex characters. You can up a lot of things about it, change it from the simplistic Captain Picard is a good guy and the Ferengi are selfish bad guys. Like, there's a lot of things you can change and shift a little bit without going so far where Discovery feels like, it just feels like they're taking everything and being like, we have to put our own spin on every single piece of Star Trek. And there's pieces of Star Trek that we just don't like this utopia of the future. Let's make it more realistic. And so then it just, for some of it, doesn't feel like Star Trek at all because they're changing so much. And there's not a bridge, but it doesn't feel as far in the direction that they've taken things from the get-go. I don't think that there's much of a bridge to resolve that. All right, Sunil Shah. I'm very sorry. I'm sure I mispronounced your name. We talked in the comment section, actually, when you asked this question. How excited are you for Shyamalan's Glass? Do you think it will continue Shyamalan's renaissance or will be a big disappointment? My take on, am I excited and do I think it'll be another disappointment? I'm extraordinarily excited for Glass. And I'm trying to average my expectations for it. For me, Unbreakable is Shyamalan's best movie. I love Unbreakable. I love Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs. All three of those, I'm a very big fan of all three of those ones. And with Signs, I get what people are talking about with the third act. And so that one kind of, as time's passed, tempered some of my enjoyment of that film. But Unbreakable, easily my favorite of his films. And I was tracking with Split. I was like, I like this. This is pretty cool. It's good. It's not great, but this is definitely good. And then that final twist reveal happens, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait for that. I was so excited leaving the theater, and that they did that he kept it a secret, that that the studio let him do that, and it worked. And I got, because I saw it a week before it hit theaters, and he did like an advanced screening type deal, and some people on the internet put up a video like, let's talk about the end of it. And it put in the thumbnail was kind of revealing some of that stuff. I got mad. It was like arguing with people in the comments section, like, why would you do this? Why would you spoil this in the thumbnail, make a video like this? Just wait till the movie comes out before you put this out. Because I was mad because I thought it was so cool that Shyamalan did this, that the studio let him do it. Now, if I think about it, like, I think Unbreakable is a great, phenomenal movie. I think Split is a good movie. So for Glass, I'm expecting an average of the two. He's not where he was at before. I think inherently the nature of storytelling he does and the groundedness, it lends itself to make for Unbreakable coming off, Glass coming off anticlimactic, because it'll by the time it comes out, it will have been 19 years, 20 years, or 19 years, and multiple movies building up to it. A lot of things that would make for you have expectations that are high. So I'm just trying to temper those to, like, I just want a movie that's really good. I'd be happy with good. As long as I'm just like, this is bad, I'll be very satisfied to get to see continuation of these stories and arcs. So I'm very, very excited for it. Yeah, there you go. Jay Vader's best episode of the Orville so far. I'll go with Krill, episode 6, where they go undercover on the ship. The stuff that bothers me about the show, the humor was toned down quite a bit or changed a little bit. Some of the characters acted too dumb and stuff like that, but actually some of the jokes actually landed, so that's where I'd go with that one. He also asked favorite cartoon series, Batman the Animated Series, period. Maybe Justice League coming in there, but all that Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, DC stuff, that's my favorite Batman the Animated Series, the starting point for it being, for nostalgia reasons and just for quality reasons, my favorite. Mari, oops, lost my questions. What's your favorite cartoon? My Little Pony? Yeah, she only discovered that like a week ago. Maury Ponce, what do you think the title of Avengers 4 will be? Without knowing, having seen Infinity War, I don't know. Because I don't know if it's going to be a continuation of Infinity War, and if it's going to be something like Infinity Crisis or something like that. But without knowing a lot more about where it's headed and where things are going to be at, even with, I don't even know what Thor Fraggle Rock's going to mess with things a little bit. So I wouldn't even have a guess. I would just be throwing out words that are spacey and epic sounding, and maybe it's not even going to go in that direction. Rich Reviews, who's one of my patrons, once again, that means he gets preferential treatment. I'll answer all of his questions. He asks, is virtual reality the future of movies? No, it's another gimmick that's kind of cool, but it doesn't replace the nature of storytelling that's cinematic, which is to say, the director and writer have set forth a path by which this story is going to unfold, and that involves controlling the camera, controlling the angle, the perspective. That's what cinematic filmmaking is. In the idea of virtual reality taking its place, it's a gimmick. It doesn't replace what people are going for with a movie. It's cool. It's awesome. I'm sure if you did, Terminator, Future Wars in virtual reality, I mean, that'd be the coolest 2 hours of my life. But it's not something that I would be like, man, I can't wait to do this at home. It's like an experience you want to go to. It's like a theme park ride as opposed to a movie which you want to keep rewatching. He also asked, what would you pitch a proper sequel, or how would you pitch a proper sequel to Saturday Night Fever? Well, I mean, the obvious answer is that you want to get the king of sequels, Sylvester Stallone, to be the one to write the script, direct it, and make that one happen. That's, of course, what you'd want to do. No, it's an interesting question because it's so specific. Of all the movies to ask me to pitch a sequel to, Saturday Night Fever is not the one that I would think that you would propose. And so I don't think it's a movie that lends itself to a sequel. It's a movie that captured a phase of life at a time period. It's tied so specifically to the disco era for a guy of a certain age dealing with certain things. And you don't have to stay, Chloe. You can go if you want. You're just going to take a nap there? That's cool. In which case, it doesn't lend itself to a sequel. It's kind of like when people are like, hey, would you like to see like a Friends reunion? No? Like, why would, like, that was a show about a bunch of people living in the city, and then we saw them leave the city, and the friendship kind of grew, leave and go other places. It would be awkward to see them come back. It doesn't make sense. It's not how, like, the appeal of it's gone. Like, I don't. Why would you want that? And so that's like, there's certain stories that are about a time. There's certain stories that are about a phase of life, and you want to see them in that context, in that way. You don't want like just this odd attempt to recapture the magic, which you can't do with stories like that. So I don't think there is one. Then he asks, what's the least deserving Best Picture winner in the last 10 years? I haven't actually seen a lot of them, but I would go with The Artist, for the simple fact of the matter, it just disappeared from our minds. That just a few years ago, a movie called The Artist won Best Picture, and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about the lead actor from it. It's just kind of like, whew, it happened and it's gone. And you could look at the list of the movies from the last 10 years, and they're either movies that we talk about a lot still to this day that were very interesting conversation starters, or the cast from that have gone on to become these respected art, like all sorts of stuff about them as to why they're significant. And then there's The Artist, and you're like, that was an interesting movie. But it's not one that you think about as any sort of, like, this is the best that we need to talk about it. So that's the one that kind of comes to mind. Jay Vaders, what's the most terrifying scene in a movie in your opinion? Movies don't really scare me. So some of these types of questions can be tricky for me because I just don't naturally kind of get scared in movies. So like the Velociraptor sequence in the control room in Jurassic Park is a great thrilling scene where you're scared, and it's not because people are getting eaten alive. It's there's kids just like, can I even breathe? Can I move? They seem to be smart. And so that's just such a well-directed sequence, but I would call it terrifying. Stuff like the opening sequence in It is really terrifying to me because I have kids, and it's a scene that's not afraid to injure kids. So that's kind of terrifying to me. As for a movie that's kind of gotten under my skin when I was younger, Predator, the first time I watched it by myself late at night on TV and kind of got freaked out or something by it. But I don't have one that really comes to mind because I don't really get terrified by movies. He also asks, if you could live as one movie character for one day, who would it be? Gotta go probably with Superman. I mean, super strength, flight, laser eyes, see-through things. There's so much fun to be had, people to be saved, get to be the hero for the day in some really just cool ways. You can fly up into space. So there's so many things you could get to do with that one. And then even with it, because you can fly really fast, you can travel the world, and there's a lot of things to be done with Superman's powers. So that's the one that would come to my mind. You get to hang out with Batman if you want and show up at Batman's lair and like, what are you doing here? I'm Superman for the day. I wanted to get to meet you a little bit. All right, next up, Mike McRock Movie Reviews asks, he's also another patron, so he gets preferential treatment, so he's got several questions in here. What's worse, Arrow and Felicity's bickering back and forth, or Iron Fist's constant whining? I've got to go with Arrow and Felicity's bickering back and forth because they used to be awesome. With Iron Fist, he's just always been bland. So there's no expectation or hope of something better. It's just, I expect him to be kind of whiny and not someone that I particularly care about. So I just kind of have low expectations for him. Arrow Felicity, it's a lot more painful to watch someone that you know has the potential to do better, that you've seen do better, be awful. When they fall from grace and you're just like, oh, why is Felicity stuck in this whiny, bickering mode, preaching, lecturing at each other, self-righteous? Why do they keep doing this when I've seen them be so much better than this? Iron Fist, I just given up on him. I don't expect any more from him. I don't know that he can do anything better than what he's doing. Arrow and Felicity, I know they can. Then he asks, on a scale of 1 to 10, how dull is Marvel's Inhumans so far? About a 3. It's pretty, well, on a scale of 1 to 10. So I guess high levels of dull. So I guess we'll go 7 or 8 levels of dull for the Inhumans. So it's, stuff happens, so I can't just go full-blown 10 out of 10. It's that 10 level of dull. Stuff happens, there's action sequences, things move, planets, some flashy things happen on screen. But we're talking about a show that's just not interesting at all. That's not compelling or anything like that. So yeah, pretty high levels of dullness, but not totally boring. Next up, what do you think are some of the most underrated movies in 2017 and the most overrated movies as well? All right, let me look at my list of movies real quick. First one I got to say, of course, you asked this question, so it's had to go this direction, but most underrated, since one of my top 10 of the year is The Glass Castle, I got to go with Glass Castle, which I know you hate. I know it's probably your most hated movie of the year. So there you go. I think it's one of the most divisive, most, I would say, misunderstood films of the year, and that's why I really do get why you hate it. I wish that you guys got why I like it. Underappreciated. Let's see, what are ones I got pretty high up here? Because it didn't get much of a wide release, I'd go with Brawl in Cell Block 99. That's a very cool movie, but it was a very limited release, so people not talking about it too much. I'm looking through my list, and there's not a lot that's kind of coming out to me that I like underappreciated under some of that stuff. Some of it's just tricky to me to measure those, because as someone that follows movie news, that does movie reviews, talk with people constantly, my perception of things is kind of based around a pretty level-headed understanding of where things are at. And so when you say underappreciated, are you talking about box office? Well, I can talk about which ones have underperformed, and that's a different answer. Which ones the critics got the score wrong? Are you talking about the audience? I don't really have an answer. So I'd say like one that had a horrible Rotten Tomatoes score, The Space Between Us, the movie about the boy born on Mars that comes back to Earth. And there's actually another movie this year that had same basic plot. I think it was the girl perspective version of it. But it had like a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think that's horribly underrated. It's The Space Between Us is a perfectly watchable YA movie that's got a quirky, fun performances and a nice romance to it. But I'm not telling you this is a great movie. I'm not telling you that it's awesome or amazing. It's just better than the 15% or whatever that it has on Rotten Tomatoes. That's what I don't know. How to talk about some of these ones. When I see people saying that, Blade Runner 2049 is the best movie in 10 years, that's overrating the movie to me. But it's underperforming at the box office. So depending on those perspectives, based on its performance at the box office, it's way underperforming. It's way better than the amount of money that's making. As compared to, it's the masterpiece, the best movie in 10 years, that feels like overpraising it to me. It's a very good movie. It's one of the best, if not maybe the best sci-fi movie of the year. I don't know that I'd say the best 10 years. And I would say it definitely has the problem of being too long and too slow, and could have cut 20 minutes and been a movie that does move into that. This is just a phenomenal movie. So anyway, there's some of those thoughts on some of that stuff. There's a lot of the Netflix movies, the batch that have been coming out the last couple of months. Because they're Netflix movies, they're underrated because of that, because they didn't hit theaters, they didn't get the big marketing promotion, so it's all word of mouth getting people to go see them. So you talk about Wheelman, the Frank Grillo movie where it's all from the perspective of the car. Great movie. Small, low-key movie. Not a ton of people talking about it because it's just a Netflix movie. The Babysitter, a Mick G movie that's actually good. This weird, quirky thing. On the internet, some people are talking about it. In general, nobody probably knows too much of what it is. So, 1922, the Thomas Jane one, another really good one. That's in certain spheres, people are talking about it. But I don't know. It kind of depends on how you want to answer the question. So then I rambled a little bit. All right, Austin Wilcutt. We only got 4 questions left, so. We're going to get this in under an hour. That's awesome. If you could destroy, erase a film franchise you hate, which one would it be? I don't know. For me to want to actually destroy it, I have to have kind of moral reasons that I think that a film series is actually damaging to something. That whether it's bad for culture or bad for people, the message that it sends, or harming the reputation of some of the original things. So the only one that really comes to mind is 50 Shades of Grey. And it's not like, oh, it's a Twilight fan fiction, kinky soccer mom. It's not that. It's very much the dangerous messaging of it, especially in the current. I'm very confused as to why Hollywood is okay with telling this type of story as a fantasy, which is to say a story about a very broken guy that turns to BDSM, but not based off the way people in BDSM communities don't say, yeah, this is how we do it. No, they present this as a guy that's unhealthy, doing unhealthy things, who is a white male of privilege and power, who has a subordinate come in that uses privilege and power to woo her into a sexual relationship that she's not comfortable with, that involves him hitting her and him using his wealth and good looks to woo her back, and the exotic lifestyle he can take her on to woo her back in. That's appalling. And you can follow my channel. I'm not by my nature like the most sensitive of people when it comes to those SJW type things. But when it comes to the blatant hypocrisy of Hollywood and everything that they say they stand for, and the way that they very much do uphold social justice warrior type positions, and then they celebrate 50 Shades of Grey and use it to launch Dakota Johnson to the A-list, and she's getting all sorts of roles from it, and that they don't treat this story like it is. They don't see the blatant issues with it, or to use their word, problematic things with 50 Shades of Grey is just shocking. And it's a dangerous story that tells people that stick in an unhealthy relationship, maybe you can fix him. Maybe you can be the one to fill in the gaps that will make him not be so broken anymore. That's not what you tell someone in an abusive relationship. That's not what you tell someone in a codependent relationship. That's not what you tell someone with a person that's using relationships and violence in relationships to relate to people. That's not how you resolve those issues. You get help and resolve your issues. If you want to do BDSM and that's your thing, and when you're a healthy person, okay, fine, do whatever you want. That's not the same thing as, as the stories presented to me. I haven't seen the movies, I haven't read the books. Having read many articles, synopses, had many discussions about it, it's presented as he's a very broken person because of his past, because of things that were done to him. Therefore, he relates to people in relationships through control, through BDSM. That's not healthy. That's a broken person. And when you can't romanticize that. That's like when the idea that the author's sitting there writing this out as like her fantasy, that's her being an unhealthy person, putting a fantasy out there, normalizing dangerous things that shouldn't be normalized, shouldn't be made normal. And so that's for the one for me that 50 Shades of Grey, we need to just wipe that out and stop pretending as if, it's so silly. Soccer moms getting spicy. It's none of that stuff. It's very unhealthy stuff that is normalizing dangerous behaviors. Then he asks, are there any films which you like the alternate ending or openings much better than the ones that they used? I can't come up with a bunch off the top of my head that were just the ending or the opening that specifically had a drastically different take for things. But like the Punisher from 2004, it has a different opening, but they couldn't actually film the additional opening. So there's a director's cut DVD of it that has a cinematic motion comic version of the intro to it. And so that could have been maybe a cool way to open that one. But the director's cut of that movie's better. The director's cut of the Daredevil movie from 2003 with Ben Affleck, that's a better movie if you see the director's cut that fleshes some things out, removes some of the datey relationship stuff, or it changes the nature of it that makes it a darker story. In general, I always think that movie's gotten a little bit of a bad rap for the wrong reasons. There's things in it that are the right reasons that I get why people are like, Bullseye's got a bullseye on his forehead. That's a little bit too literal to the comics. I get that in the park scene. But there's other things about it that aren't. It's not nearly as bad as people claim it is. And the director's cut especially being a much better version of it. But anyway, better openings and endings. Terminator 2, alternate ending. Much worse, not better. Man, I'm not coming up with it. If you have some thought ones you guys can think of alternate beginnings or endings that make them better, let me know. I just can't come up with any. Maybe if I look at my movies real quick. No, nothing's coming to mind. I'm sorry about that. All right, right, last two questions coming from B-Wise, another patron of mine, supporter over there. Once again, final plug for Patreon, my Patreon website. If you want to support my channel, get some special access privilege when it comes to Q&A, exclusive content, a special kind of comment talking back and forth stuff with me, special access, consider supporting me over on Patreon. He asked, what movie genre do you want to die? There's no movie genre I want to die. I think we all have different tastes. We all like different things. And so the idea that different genres kind of come and go in their level of popularity, I think that's a good thing. But it's not like, YA movies, all of them suck, I want them to die. Like, no, let's get them in the right batches, the right amount of them, and in the right places. Sometimes some of these can be transitioned over to TV and they do better over there. So there's really not a genre that I even like, as you even asked the question, I don't even have the one that I was like, oh man, I wish that this would go away. Like there's ways of thinking in movies that I could talk about, like the gratuitous reboots that miss the concept of the original. I want those to go away. When a few years back, they rebooted and remade both RoboCop and Total Recall, directed by Paul Verhoeven, who, if you've seen the originals, he's a very distinct director that is very violent in his action, very bloody, gory, distinct level of satire and dark humor in his stories that's distinctly Paul Verhoeven. That's the spice he puts on top of it that makes these stories kind of give them that extra pop to them. They remade them and they took these very hard R, weird, quirky Paul Verhoeven movies and they made them PG-13, slick sci-fi movies for teenagers. That's a weird thing to do. Like that type of thinking where they just go, we've got a property, let's try and streamline it and make it for teenage boys. That I don't get it. Make a new story that appeals to 21st century, 2017, 2012, whatever. Teenage, make a movie for them. Give them their thing. Don't take a movie that I've been watching for 25 years and make a crappy version of it. That's weird. I don't get it. And it's not even like that Total Recall and RoboCop were just horrible movies. They were just, it's like flavorless. No spice to them. It's just kind of generic, slick blockbusters, what they were, with even the people they casted them at the time felt like generic A-listers or generic actor faces you remember. Boom, throw them in there. So that sort of stuff is probably the thing that most I would be like, let's stop doing that. And I'm not anti-remake or reboot. It's the empty ones where you just look at it and you just go, no one that's a fan of RoboCop wants this slick PG-13 version of it. Like it's like fundamentally you don't understand what RoboCop was. Anyway, that's what comes to mind. I'm expanding a little bit. Now to that that works out as a nice transition into your next question. What movie series would you like to see remade? The one I always give whenever people ask this question. And I always give this one partially because people say this one is the series they never want to be remade. I absolutely think that Back to the Future lends itself to being remade. Hear me out when I say that. The concept, the central idea of a high schooler of today going back in time to when their parents were in high school is a timeless concept that can be remade about every 20 years. And it would be just as impactful, just as cool. Now, when I say I want you to remake Back to the Future, what I do not want you to do is tell a story about a teenager in 1985 going back to 1955. What I'm talking about is a teenager, let's say they announce they're going to do this movie today and it's going to come out in 2020. So what you do if you remake it is you take a teenager from 2020 and go back to see his parents in high school in 1990. That's interesting. You take a digital era, always have known smartphones, always have known high-speed internet, not just internet. They've always known high-speed internet on a thing in their pocket. And you send it back to their parents back in 1990, before the internet, before smartphones, back when we had Sega Genesis. I think we just got Super Nintendo, or we were about to get Super Nintendo. That's an interesting timeless concept. It's not about retelling the exact story with Doc and Marty, which maybe you do Doc and Marty, but that's what I think would make very well for a story to be remade every 20 years or so, because society changes. So that central idea of it is what is absolutely transferable. And that's what makes for a good reboot. That's what makes for a good remake. A concept that's transferable. The idea of RoboCop, there's no transferable new change of idea that's happened since the original came out, because it's just a police officer that's a robot. And we had a capitalist society back then, and we got a capitalist society right now. We're consumeristic back then, we're consumeristic back now. So the transfer of it, there's not like a new thing that's interesting to explore. There's inherently an interesting idea of a modern teenager of whatever right now is going 30 years back in time, and every 20 or so years that resets itself because enough time has passed, the culture has changed, that there's fun opportunities in that transition of what you can do with all of that. So that's the one that always kind of comes to mind. And I don't know if you have something like Doc, you have someone like Marty. You might not call him Doc, you might not call him Marty. You can do it. This is one where you can do any sort of gender race swap you want, and I wouldn't have any issues with it, because the central concept of it, you just take some modern societal person of way things work right now, and you take them back to their parents 30 years in the past. And there's so much storytelling potential that's fresh and new every 20 years doing that. So Back to the Future is the one that I'll probably keep saying forever, because it's all very, it's obvious to me. I get kind of why people like, who are you gonna cast as Marty? Who are you gonna cast as Doc? No. That's Marty and Doc are the characters that make it so great. They're not the central concept that makes it great. They're not the transferable concept, though you could transfer them. So there you go. That's my take on it. We are slightly over an hour. It looks like maybe I can trim a little bit just to get us down to an hour. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm not even gonna do my final normal outro deal. If you're new watching this, that's kind of interesting. Click that subscribe button if you actually watch this whole thing, and talk to you later.